This is Trade Flow News, bringing you relevant news and insights from around the world. Trade Flow News, enabling trade for SMEs and economies worldwide.
These are some of the key topics that we will be looking into in today's program.
First, let's take a look at the overnight headlines which are impacting the commodity markets. India has urged utilities to import coal despite having the world's fourth largest reserves, with several power plants on the verge of running out of fuel due to a surge in power demand. Coal-fired power accounts for more than 70% of India's electricity generation. Electricity generation makes up 3/4 of India's coal consumption. Thermal power plants, which may import coal for blending, may explore ways to enhance imports of coal to tide over the current crisis, the Federal Power Ministry said in an August 30 notice seen by Reuters.
U.S. crude stocks dropped sharply while petroleum products supplied by refiners hit an all-time record despite the rise in coronavirus cases nationwide, the Energy Information Administration said on Wednesday. Crude inventories fell by 7.2 million barrels in the week to August 27 to 425.4 million barrels, compared with analysts' expectations in a Reuters poll for a 3.1 million barrel drop. Product supplied by refineries, a measure of demand, rose to 22.8 million barrels per day in the most recent week. That's a one-week record, and signals strength in consumption for diesel, gasoline and other fuels by consumers and exporters.
Moving on to the top news in the energy sector.
Energy companies are having a hard time getting workers and supplies to offshore production platforms and refineries to make repairs after Hurricane Ida due to extensive storm damage to onshore infrastructure, executives said. Some firms are still early in assessing damage from Ida, 3 days after the storm tore through the U.S. Gulf of Mexico, pushing several feet of water into coastal plants and toppling transmission towers inland. Its 150 mph, 240 km/h winds were the strongest since Laura hit the state a year ago. Roughly 1.7 million barrels of offshore oil production is offline, and damage around transportation and support hubs, including Homa and Port Fortune, could slow efforts to restore production.
India's August gasoil consumption declined from July and stayed below pre-COVID 2019 levels as monsoon rains hit mobility and industrial activity, preliminary sales data from state fuel retailers showed on Wednesday. Indian state retailers last month sold about 4.9 million tons of diesel, up 16% from August 2020 and down about 10% from August 2019, the data showed. Sale of gasoil, which accounts for about 2/5 of India's refined fuel demand and which is directly linked with industrial and construction activity, fell by 9.3% from July as floods in some parts of the country crippled movement.
Next, we have the top news in metal markets.
Prices of nickel on the Shanghai Futures Exchange leaped to their highest on record on Tuesday, supported by solid demand and low inventories across the world. The most traded October nickel contract on the Shanghai Futures Exchange hit a record 149,870 yuan, $23,197.89 a ton, up 21% year to date. 3-month nickel on the London Metal Exchange touched its highest since July 30 at $19,810 a ton, having risen 17% so far this year.
Copper prices fell more than 2% on Wednesday after data showed that global factory activity slowed in August. In China, by far the biggest metals consumer, manufacturing contracted for the first time in nearly 1.5 years. Benchmark copper on the London Metal Exchange, LME, was down 2.2% at $9,310.50 a ton in official trading. However, prices are still up 20% this year after rising 26% in 2020, with analysts optimistic that demand for the metal used in power grids will increase as the world ditches fossil fuels for electrification. We will now look at the top news in the agricultural sector. Brazilian soybean farmers are keeping their crops instead of selling them because they expect prices to rise further as global supplies tighten, according to brokers, buyers and sellers in the world's largest producer and exporter of the oilseed. Another reason for crop hoarding is the fear the La Niña weather phenomenon could limit the next crop in South America, farmers and brokers said. They also cited escalating domestic political tensions that could weaken the country's currency, the real, over the next few months. Farmers hope to force exporters and the local processing industry to pay more. This, in turn, could feed international worries about food inflation by further boosting global soy and corn prices that hit 8-year highs earlier this year. Finally, we have the most recent news on the financial market.
Singapore Exchange is preparing to roll out easier guidelines for listings of special purpose acquisition companies, SPACs, in the city-state, which would make it the first major Asian bourse to accept such investment vehicles, 4 sources familiar with the matter told Reuters on Wednesday. The changes come after SGX, which has struggled to capture large listings of high-growth companies, received market feedback that some of its earlier proposals were too strict. SGX's regulatory arm is now considering easing a minimum 300 million Singapore dollars market value proposal for SPACs and a proposal that warrants cannot be detached from underlying shares, 2 of the sources said. That is all for today's news on commodity markets. Stay tuned to TradeFlow News as we continue to provide you with more updates. We also invite you to follow us on Twitter at TradeFlow News, which allows you to watch our program on your mobile device or desktop to receive information from there.